Welcome to today's episode of Current Christian. I'm Joseph Doudt, otherwise known as Zero Doubt by this YouTube channel, and I'm here to talk about Charlie Kirk today because there's a lot of Christians disagreeing on whether or not we should venerate him as an example of a God-fearing, Jesus-following man. I hope to make the answer clear to you as to what we as genuine Christians should do over the course of this video. I'll be talking about some specific issues, some of his quotes and stances on different things, and just digging into the reasons why some Christians do not want to honor him in the way that others do. By the end, the picture should hopefully be pretty clear. Now, to start off, every genuine believer has got to acknowledge that murder is expressly forbidden by God. If you are cheering on his death, we can't even have a conversation. We at least need to start from the place where we agree that his death was a tragedy of the first order and should not have occurred, whether or not you liked him. Now, I understand that you may have forgotten this niche command of God not to murder, but let me jog your memory real quick. Now, whatever God thinks, the murder of Christians, I know for sure, is cheered on by Satan and his people. So if you feel inclined to cheer on or even be somewhat happy over the murder of a God-fearing man like Charlie Kirk, consider which side you're on. Anyways, assuming we started from the position of agreeing that his death is tragic, we might not necessarily agree that he was a genuine believer. Now, let's dig in first to what Charlie himself said. I've got a quote from him right here where he said, "I am nothing without Jesus. I'm a sinner. I fall incredibly short of the glory of God. We all do. I gave my life to the Lord in 5th grade, and it's the most important decision I've ever made. And everything I do incorporates Jesus Christ." He also said that if he was to be remembered for anything, he'd want it to be for his faith. Beyond that, he made a post just days before his death saying, "Jesus defeated death so you can live." That might be somewhat prophetic at this point, in retrospect, tragically prophetic, but it's awesome that he was using his platform to spread the truth and to lead people to a hope in Jesus Christ. And we know Charlie had no interest in virtue signaling, so if he said things like that, we can assume he meant it because he didn't care what people thought about him. Of course, he got into debates all the time with liberals and leftists, but he also would challenge conservatives when he didn't agree with what they did or said. He was unapologetic about his genuine beliefs. He was always all about being a witness for Jesus to all kinds of people. It wasn't just about whether you're liberal or conservative. It should be clear by now that Charlie was clearly a self-professed Christian, and his actions, his words also seem to line up with that. Now, he may have said things you didn't always agree with or you didn't always think was the nicest ever, but it doesn't mean he was not a genuine believer. But anyways, regardless of such inconsequential things as video evidence, as posts he's made over the history of his accounts online, some people still don't think he's a genuine Christian, so let's dig into why. First of all, a lot of people considered him a tried and true racist. Now, Vernelia Randall, a distinguished journalist at racism.org, big surprise right there, says that behind the branding of patriotism and freedom, the record shows a pattern of rhetoric, organizational culture, and alliances that echoed white supremacist and Christian nationalist ideologies. And she went on to condemn Kirk because he attacked the ideas of systemic racism and critical race theory. And she said that his comments were a political strategy to delegitimize Black pain and deny the realities of structural racism in America. Guys, here's the problem. When somebody disagrees politically with your basic premise on an issue, you can't prove them wrong by saying they're denying reality. That's not exactly how it works. You could say someone's denying reality if they think they're a man trapped in a woman's body, because the reality is they have a certain biological body right there. But if you're going to go and say there's systemic racism still existing in America that is setting Black people back, and there's all of this terrible stuff going on that needs to be paid back over time, you've got to prove your position there. And there's a lot of proof against it, which I have seen. I've yet to see any really convincing proof for it. The fact that Charlie spoke out against things like DEI and critical race theory does not make him a racist. That means that he saw problems in those ideologies and the ways they were being implemented in society. We all saw the terrible things Black Lives Matter did and said, what the leaders did. They took all the donors' money and bought multi-million-dollar houses. It was never about truly bringing justice or fairness service to society for these people. It was about exploiting an emotional political moment in society to gain as much money and power as possible. Now, Kirk, of course, being an amazing debater, would often use facts and statistics to back up all of his comments, and he would be perfectly open about them to the people he was debating. But the people he was debating also had an ace up their sleeve. They had the strong debate tactic known as feelings. Charlie's haters would typically resort to emotional arguments, such as calling him a fascist, sexist, or racist, in order to prove him wrong rather than using actual facts or evidence. Now, let's disprove two of those isms right away. Turning Point USA has two annual conferences, the Young Women's Leadership Summit and the Young Black Leadership Summit. Charlie organized these to bring people who showed promise out of society to become leaders. Those who truly believe that Charlie was a racist, sexist unbeliever don't really have any evidence to back that up. I think they know that deep down, and they're more concerned about justifying their deep-seated hatred for people who politically disagree with them. See, people know deep down, because of the morality which God has planted in each person, that cheering violence is not a good thing. And that's why they're always looking for some excuse to cheer it on. They have to slap some bad label on Charlie in order to justify it in their minds. Nobody says, yeah, I think Charlie was a respectable guy who had good takes and he did good things with his life, but I'm still glad he died. Nobody says that. They know there has to be a reason, so they slap on various media buzzwords, such as all those isms, in order to make him look bad. Now, I personally hope that American culture returns to a place where people don't wish violence and death upon people who disagree with them. And I think a step in the right direction is allowing there to be consequences for people who work at various corporations and have made these crazy comments online to lose their jobs for being out of step with their company's values. That's just a common sense step here. There are consequences for saying stupid things, even if you have the right to say it. Another step in the right direction would be to somehow find a way to prevent CNN, MSDNC, and their ilk from constantly spreading lies 24/7 with no real repercussions. Ultimately, the vast majority of Charlie's stances were absolutely Christian, and before you try to label them as somehow offensive to one group or another, remember that being Christian doesn't mean just throwing away every single policy stance that could potentially offend somebody. It means finding out what the real truth is and standing up for it, whether people applaud you or condemn you for it. It's not about making everybody happy. If you think he could have said things in a nicer way, fine. I could see that argument. Everybody could, technically. But remember, Jesus flipped tables. Jesus called the Pharisees whitewashed tombs and a brood of vipers. He wasn't exactly super polite and kind when it came to wickedness and evil. He was always gentle on brokenness, and he emphasized his forgiveness, but he was harsh on the wickedness in the world. Genuine Christians ought to acknowledge the fact that abortion, the dangers of transgenderism, the danger especially it poses to women and children, and then the indoctrination of children in schools today, that is all wickedness. And Charlie stood up against that, which is something a lot of you are unwilling to do. But he wasn't a Christian because you disagreed with something he said. You know that doesn't make any sense. You're free to disagree with him. You don't have to align perfectly with him on everything. I don't even, and I'm making a video about him. But you cannot say that we can't respect and venerate this man who stood up for truth, who stood up for his faith, who preached Jesus to millions of people because he didn't agree with you on immigration policy. Here's the deal. You can have political disagreements with him, but you cannot use those disagreements as an excuse to call him an unbeliever or a bad representative of Christianity. If you do that, you are putting your politics above your faith. And before you cry hypocrite, saying conservatives also call liberal Christians fake Christians, consider the fact that the leftist Christians who dislike the conservative party do so because they think the conservatives purportedly act in a non-Christian way. They're not nice enough. They're not gentle enough. They're not giving enough, welcoming enough. Now, there's an argument to be made that, of course, Jesus was nice, gentle, and welcoming, but when it came to wickedness, like I mentioned earlier, he did not just roll over. But the conservatives who point out liberal Christians who stand for things like abortion and transgenderism and the indoctrination are calling them out for standing for blatantly unbiblical things. The Bible is clear on all of that stuff. It's clear on abortion. It's clear on rebellion against biological design. It's clear about moral relativism, toxic acceptance of evil. Jesus always made clear that there's forgiveness and grace, but he was never soft on sin sin and evil. Now, if you still want to complain about Christians honoring Charlie Kirk, I want you to ask yourself, do you genuinely believe he was not a real Christian, or do you find yourself being somewhat happy about his death and wanting to justify and excuse it? And deep down, you know that this should bother a true believer more than it does you if he was a real Christian who just got assassinated. So you want to convince yourself he wasn't. Don't let your politics go before your faith. Charlie Kirk was a man of God who used his platform to spread the gospel. Now, conservative policies are by no means inerrant, but they are a lot closer to the Bible than liberal policies. And if you deny that, you really need to read your Bible. Romans 1:32 says, though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like people who approve the things that are going to lead people to hell and away from Jesus. That sounds to me like the toxic acceptance of every single lifestyle that liberal Christians want to have today, no matter how they impact your relationship with Jesus. Isaiah 5:20 says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. If you want to call Charlie Kirk not a good person, you better have good reasons, because you do not want to be caught seeing good and evil in the wrong ways. Finally, Proverbs 10:7 says, the memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. Only time will tell whose memories are going to turn out to be a blessing in the long term, but all those people who act wickedly, who speak these terrible things online, yeah, their names are going to rot one day. They will not leave a meaningful legacy. Consider your life. Consider how you can grow closer with Jesus Christ, how you can stand for truth, how you can live differently from the world around you. No matter what friend groups you're in, no matter what your family believes, find the truth for yourself, because truth exists and it is objective. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I hope it made some of these things a bit more clear to you than it was previously. Have a great day.